Hey there, everyone, and welcome into our weekly Wednesday webinar. I am Danny Robinson. I'm one of the sales directors here at Route Consultant, and I'm really happy that you're able to come in and join us this week. If this is your first time coming into our webinar, welcome. We're so happy to have you here for the first time. And if you're coming back, we're really glad that you decided to do that as well. Real quick today, before I bring Josh Gregory on, we're going to go through our weekly disclaimer. This is one of the most traditional things that we do here every single Wednesday. So bear with me while we go through the legalese, if you will. Real quick, Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, and is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, I'll let you know that today we're going to bring Josh Gregory on here in just a minute. We're going to dive into our topic for the day. We figured since Josh and I went over some of what the line haul blackout was a couple of weeks ago and how that relates to renegotiating line haul rates, that we'd go through the negotiation and renegotiation process of the P&D side today with you guys. So that's going to be our topic today. While we're going through this, if questions come into your mind, note that we have a chat box and a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen there. Please make sure that all your questions go into the Q&A area, and we'll use the chat feature to pump some messages into you guys, links that you might need to use throughout the process, okay? Once Josh is done delivering his content, we'll go through a couple of quick event updates, go through some new listings we've brought to the market, and then, of course, we'll open it up for our final Q&A session for the day. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for that to start, Josh, why don't you go ahead and come on? We can dive right into it today. Welcome back, bud.
Thanks, Danny. Good seeing everybody again. So as Danny mentioned, exactly what he said, we'll be talking a little bit about the negotiations process for P&D today. I will briefly at the end remind everybody, in case you weren't on last week, of what the line haul negotiation process is. It's a really quick update, so I'll make sure that you hear that at the end too if you weren't on last time. So as contractors in the FedEx space, you will have a contract with FedEx. And so what that contract is going to do is it's going to lay out the exact rates that you'll be paid by FedEx. And there are going to be different points in your journey in which you're going to negotiate those rates. Now, for those of you who are new or just getting into the space, I'm going to talk through all the scenarios and the time frames in which you'll be negotiating and what that process is actually going to look like. And then I'm going to give some tips at the end to help maximize the value of your negotiation. Now, again, like I mentioned, we'll talk about line haul at the end. So let's just start by talking through the most common point in which most of you will negotiate a contract, which is at the end of a current contract term. Most contracts in the FedEx space are 1 year long, but you may still occasionally see a 2-year contract. They are very rare now. Almost all of them are 1 year now. And so typically you will have a FedEx negotiator who will reach out to you, usually a couple of months before your contract expires, and they're going to send you an email and let you know that they're beginning a 14-day process. Now, the first thing you will get are 3 offers, and these are essentially 3 versions of a contract rate structure to choose between. And these 3 offers are called MISOs. MESO, which stands for multiple, equivalent, simultaneous offers. So if you're new to the FedEx space, get used to the acronyms. So these 3 offers are basically designed by the FedEx engineering team. And this is FedEx saying that they have analyzed your territory, your market, your volume, and they've come to a value for your territory. And so that revenue figure that they've come to is what they are willing to pay you for the next year, the next 12 months. Now, in theory, each of those 3 offers will be exactly the same. There is a sliding scale here between the 3 options that you'll get for the contract. So MISO 1 has a higher percentage of your compensation tied to fixed charges, which are things like the service charge that are the same every week and don't depend on volume. And then option 3 is going to have the higher percentage of your compensation tied to variable charges. So things like the per package and the per stop rate. And then option 2 is just going to be in the middle of those, basically the balance between those 2 options. Now, FedEx will not give you the formulas that they used to calculate these numbers. The only thing that they will really show you are your historical volumes for the territory, and then their growth projections that they have for your volume. Other than that, they're not going to show you any of the other formulas or any of the other calculations that they got to these numbers that they're projecting and these numbers that they are assigning to your revenue for the next year. Now, really importantly, FedEx does tend to be conservative on their volume projection. Those revenue projections also do not include peak season volume. The reason FedEx does this is because if they overshot the projection, it would mean that they're paying you more than they have to all year long. They'd rather it be that they're undershooting the volumes, that they only pay you more money when they're also making more money. They're also a public company, so at the end of the day, they do want to be conservative so that they aren't missing their expectations. Because of that, we've traditionally advised going for Miso 3, which is where the higher portion of your contract is tied to variable. Because what that means is if FedEx has undershot the projection and you do even one more stop or one more package than FedEx is projecting, then you'll make more money if more of your compensation is tied to the variable charges. For those of you that are getting express in the near future and are going to have that volume increase, it would also make sense to go towards something like Miso 3. Now, if your principal concern is consistency, or if you're worried still about any kind of potential recession, you may be in the camp of leaning more towards Miso 1 or Miso 2. So those are your three options, and you'll have 7 days to select one of those three options. If you do select one of them, you'll get an upfront bonus that is 1% of your revenue for the year. So on $1 million contract, you'll get a $10,000 upfront payment for accepting one of those three Miso options within the first 7 days. If you do not select one of these three Misos, you'll then get 7 additional days to go through a traditional negotiation. Now, these are not typical negotiations like you may be used to in any other business. There is a negotiator involved, but they are there to make sure that the revenue doesn't move or doesn't move much, even as you change the rates and propose different options. So what I mean by that is that you may negotiate with FedEx to get a higher stop charge, but it'll most likely come out of your service charge or your brand charge or some other category. However, you should know that restructuring your rates, even if it doesn't change that bottom line FedEx revenue projection, can have a huge impact on how much money you actually make at the end of the year. And so if you're going through a negotiation or have one coming up and you have questions about how to maximize your specific contract, just reach out to our team and we can help. It's also important to note, I mentioned there is that early acceptance bonus if you take one of the three Misos in the first 7 days. If you do not accept one of those Misos and go to traditional negotiation, you don't lose that money, but instead of getting it as an upfront payment, it'll get rolled into your rates. So you still get the money, it's just, it'll be factored into your different rates as opposed to getting it up front. And in a lot of scenarios, that alone can make a big difference in your bottom line at the end of the year. If you're thinking about the fact, like we talked about, where sometimes FedEx will undershoot that volume projection. So beyond that normal timeline in which you are negotiating these contracts, there are a couple of other scenarios in which you may negotiate with FedEx. The first is a renegotiation. Now, this is when you reach out to FedEx in the middle of a current contract and you ask them to renegotiate your rates. The most important thing for a renegotiation to be successful is that you need to show FedEx that there's a reason their previous rates were wrong, or at least just need to be updated. So it's really critical to put as much information together as you can if you want this to work. You'll really want to create a narrative that makes it easy for your terminal to approve a renegotiation. And so that involves a few things to think through. The first is that everyone needs to get familiar with something called the unique characteristics of your territory. So even if you're not worried about renegotiations, you need to listen to this, because this is a way to codify the various things about your territory that cost you time or money every day. You know, so if there's traffic or there's a bridge that's under construction or there's a stop that takes an extra 2 hours every day, anything that you can think of needs to be called out. And we have a template for that that we can share with you if you reach out to us. And this one is really important because it's not just for renegotiations, but really every single year when you're coming up to the time when it's about time to renew your contract, before you get your Misos, you need to submit in these unique characteristics. That's going to have the highest chance of improving the revenue that FedEx assigns your territory. So whether you're talking about a renegotiation or just your normal year, you need to make sure that you're filling out these unique characteristics and getting it in the hands of your terminal manager and the negotiator every year. And as crazy as it seems, I would not assume that what you sent last year is still going to be saved and that they're still going to have it when they're looking at your contract for next year. I would still submit it every single year and illustrate anything that's happened. Make sure to re-highlight the unique characteristics about your territory that cost you time and money. Now, for a renegotiation beyond the unique characteristics, you're going to need to show receipts or any detail you can for expenses that have increased that you think FedEx hasn't properly taken into account. And the last thing you need to do is put a written document together that explains all of this, and then also asks for a specific revenue number. And I'm not talking about asking for $1 million. I'm saying $1,234,568.43. Be very specific and show that that revenue ask that you're asking for is based on those expenses and the things that have changed. Because what you want to do is make it as easy as possible for FedEx to say yes and to approve the process. Now, important to note, there's no guarantee this is going to work. There's no guarantee that FedEx has to take a renegotiation, but it is a pathway and it is an option for you as a contractor, and it doesn't cost you anything to submit for a renegotiation. You're basically just going in the portal and submitting. So this is something to be aware of, and it is a tool to use during a year where you feel like you need to renegotiate mid-year. Now, the last way that you'll see a negotiation happen is if you're buying a new business. Now, if you are buying a full business from a seller, you should not have to negotiate. You'll inherit the current contract, its rates, and its length. However, if you are buying a carve out or a piece of an existing business, you will have to negotiate again. So general timeline and what to think through is that you'll enter into a contract with the seller, you'll interview with FedEx, and then once you're approved with FedEx, they'll give you a FedEx ID, and then you're going to go through some compliance and administrative steps, and then they'll submit your proposed territory to the FedEx engineering team. So that engineering team is going to take the specific zip codes that you're buying, and they're going to designate a new contracted service area, CSA, for just those zip codes to be your new territory. Now, that process can take anywhere from 2 weeks up to 6 weeks or more. So it is also really difficult for us to accelerate this process because the FedEx engineering team is basically a black box. But if those problems really start, if it's been more than 6 weeks, or even if it's getting close to 6 weeks, let us know. Sometimes there are levers we can pull to get it out of engineering. And then once you have the CSA designated, you'll get those 3 Misos, just as what we talked about before. Critically, the seller will also get 3 Misos. Because if they're buying, if they're selling a piece of their territory, that means their new territory looks different too. And both parties have to agree to their new contracts, or that deal is going to be delayed. And you usually get about 2 weeks to agree to those negotiations, like I talked about before. So those are the 3 scenarios where you would really negotiate. Now, I've mentioned a couple of things to be thinking about when you come up on a negotiation, but just a reminder again. So Miso 1 is generally what you go for if you are either expecting express volume increases or you're just looking to maximize your profitability. Miso 1 and 2 are where you go to maximize consistency or to minimize the risk from a recession in volume. And then a traditional negotiation is more if you know your territory and know how to manage the negotiator in the process. It can be really hard to do traditional negotiations if you're buying a business for the first time, just because you won't really know any of those unique characteristics that I talked about before. You won't really know what's the most important for your territory. So I often find that when you're first buying a business, it can be easier to just select one of the 3 Misos. Now, no matter what, every year you need to be filling out and submitting those unique characteristics to ensure that FedEx is properly accounting for all the expenses that are affecting your territory and your market. And lastly, the revenue bottom line number on the Miso model can be misleading, especially when you're comparing it to previous years. And so it's really important to properly analyze those differences to see how much the contract has improved or declined. So if you're struggling to analyze those metrics and process a new contract, reach out to us, because recently I have seen plenty of contracts that looked like a decline in revenue, but actually were better than the year before. And we are happy to help in all of those scenarios to help you think through those. I promised at the beginning is that I'd come back to it quickly. So the last thing here is the line haul contracts. So again, we have a whole webinar on this that Danny and I did a couple of weeks ago if you want to see more detail, but these are not negotiated contracts. But basically what happens is every August, FedEx begins a blackout period in which they take all the line haul contracts, they increase the rates, and then they just tell you what the new rates are. There's no negotiation. They just update the rates across the country at the exact same time. And we're actually in the blackout period right now. And that ends this year on Sunday, August 27th. So we will see those new rates for line haul very soon. Now, just the last thing to leave you with, negotiations aren't anything to be afraid of. It's just important to know when they occur, what you should be looking for, and how long that process takes so that you can be successful. So that is what I wanted to cover today. So I will kick it back over to you, Danny, and let you take it from here.
Perfect. That was great. Thanks so much, Josh. So everyone, now that we've kind of gotten through the bulk of that content, I'm going to go through just a couple of quick updates, and then we'll open up the floor to the Q&A portion of the webinar. So go to the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, type in all the questions that you have there. I already see some starting to flow in, so just keep them coming, and I'll reel them off to Josh here in just a minute. A couple of events that we wanted to highlight that are coming up here really soon. First and foremost, this upcoming week on August the 28th, we'll be having a line haul themed new investor summit here in our offices in Nashville. That is going to be a one-day event compared to our normal two-day long new investor summit. There's going to be a lot of different things that we have available for you there. If you're remotely interested in the line haul space, roll over to the chat section real quick. Our friend John just put the link to register for that event right in there. We'd love to see you guys here in the office. We'll treat you great. We'll have a lot of fun and learn a good bit of stuff too. Next, coming up, we actually have a peak season prep road show that's going to be September the 14th in Dallas. We're going to drop the details for that in the chat box right now as well. You can register for that. There's also links to get your hotel rooms and everything nailed down there. Going to be a ton of fun. We're going to have a happy hour, a lot of great content, a lot of vendor partnerships and relations that we have that can help you prep for peak season. Do not miss this. It's going to be at a really great location. Dallas is a blast, even though it's hot this time of year. We would love to host you there. And of course, even though Expo 2023 is just barely in our rear view mirror, we're already prepping for next year again in Dallas, Texas for our 2024 Contractor Expo and Party. Please register early. We want to fill those room blocks up. We want everyone to get the best rates possible, and we want to see you all there. So register for that as well. Go ahead and get it out of the way now so you're set and ready to go. Before we dive into Q&A, I see a lot of you guys typing your questions in. I'm excited to get to those. We do have a couple of new listings. I'm going to step a little closer to my screen here so my old eyes can see. The first new listing we wanted to highlight is out of Central Maryland. This is 7 P&D routes listed at $500,000. That is represented about 63% of total revenue, which means the business is running close to a 13% margin. It is a profitable operation in a safe neighborhood. There are 2 managers on staff to help with the daily operations. 11 total trucks that include 4 spares for overflow and growth. It is a really dense suburban CSA with lower mileage and a true opportunity for some remote ownership. So contact us about that one if the Central Maryland market is interesting to you. Out of Western Michigan, we have 13 P&D routes listed at $1,100,000. That represents a little under 75% of total revenue, running a very healthy 18% EBITDA margin there. It is a quality FedEx Ground operation primed for additional growth. There are 2 managers with combined 10 years of experience. That is a well-tenured management team in this space, guys. That's a really great benefit there. 20 trucks, that means 7 total spares for overflow. All of the vehicles will come free and clear to the new owner. A large roster of experienced drivers in a residential area with high growth potential. The route service are dense, which can absolutely elevate your capital, alleviate some of your capital expenditures. And finally, out of Central Kentucky, 15 P&D routes listed at a mere $965,000. That's less than 60% of total revenue for a business that's running current 15% margins. It is a profitable operation with a very large and very healthy fleet. 1 manager, 2 lead drivers, 20 trucks. That leaves you with 5 spares. Tenured drivers, 16 years of experience on the management team. The business operates a 6-day work week and services a really nice mixture of urban and rural routes. So you get the best of some of those high variable rates that Josh was just talking about, and you can really use those to your benefit when we dive into some of those lower mileage, really dense urban routes. It's a way to kind of double dip there. So those unique CSAs are not very common. Please reach out to me. I'm actually managing that listing. So hit your boy up. I'm ready to go. With that being said, we're going to bring Josh back into the fold here. Again, the chat box is going to be full of a bunch of great links that you can use to register for all the awesome events that we just talked about. But we're going to go ahead over to the Q&A section, and we're going to start going through some of these questions. The first one, always from an anonymous attendee. What does MISO stand for again? It's real easy. MESO, multiple equivalent simultaneous offers, which essentially is meant to you guys to mean that all three of the MISOs that they present to you should eventually pay out the exact same amount of total revenue for the year. But we, of course, know that given some of the nuance that Josh just mentioned, that's not exactly the case. So with that being said, Josh, anything you want to add to what MISO stands for, what they really are?
Nope, that's what matters is in theory, they're all the same. In reality, they're typically different. And so it just depends on your priorities, what you want. But yeah, MESO, and like I said earlier, it is not the last abbreviation you will need to remember in the FedEx space. So just add it to the list.
We tell people all the time that at FedEx Ground, you're managing trucks and people, but you also got to know your acronyms. That's the big number. You got to know them, guys. All right, from Tim Fincham, what does the seller exactly need to do to alert FedEx that he plans to transfer the CSA to a new owner? This is a great question. Me and Josh can speak to her blue in the face about this, but Josh, why don't you go through some of the finer steps there?
Yeah, so just basic process, a couple of things. So first, when typically the seller will wait until there's a signed contract with the buyer, that's the normal process. Sometimes it happens where things move forward because of timing before that, but usually you'll sign the contract with the seller, and at that point, the seller will reach out to the terminal and let them know that they have identified a buyer that they want to bring in to take over their territory, and that'll kick off the interview steps. And that's the main way that they alert the terminal. There's also a few administrative steps after the interview. Once the terminal has approved the buyer, there's an assignment of the territory that happens in the system. But the main alerting of the terminal that happens is really just the seller reaching out over email or phone or in person, but at least over email, because we do want a paper trail with a dated kind of timestamp of showing when the process started. But usually working with the terminal manager to get them set up for the interview.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what I would say there. That's pretty much always how it's going to start off. So we don't need to add much more to that. John Markley asks, are there routes currently for sale? What's the price? What's the location? I got to tell you, John, we've got more than anyone else in the country. Check out our website, routeconsultant.com. You can see every single listing we have there, along with some of the metrics, purchase price, and important details. Then just reach out to us, info@routeconsultant.com. We'll get an NDA sent over to you. You can review and sign that. And once we have all that in place, we'll send you all the detailed financials that you want on any business listing that meets some of the standards that you're looking for. We've got plenty of inventory ready for you. Come ask us about it. We'd be happy to. Tyler Harris, we'll move on to you. He says, I am purchasing a contract, and when I reviewed the fuel charge, it does not cover the entire weekly fuel spend. Is this normal? Great question, Tyler. What do you have to say, Josh?
Yeah, so it is normal. So the way that FedEx thinks about the fuel charge is that they're trying to offset the price of fuel. They are not trying to completely cover it. Some other spaces, so Amazon it operates differently, and in a lot of ways, they're essentially paying for your fuel. FedEx is different. So they have a rate built in to it'll usually cover, somewhere between 1/3 and 2/3 of the cost of the fuel. That is a negotiated rate, though, so it depends on the contract what you did with your fuel rate. Sometimes people will really lower that rate to put it into other categories, because the way that the fuel rate works is that each week, as the price of fuel moves up and down, the fuel charge also moves up and down proportionally. So it's not going to move up. If fuel goes up $1, fuel rate's not going to go up $1, but it will go up a similar percentage. If it's a 10% increase in fuel price, a similar increase to your fuel rate. Like I said, though, it is normal. It will not cover the complete price of fuel, but it is a hedge against rising fuel costs, and it will cover some of your fuel costs. But sometimes you'll see plenty of we've had plenty of contracts where we really lowered the fuel rate and put it into areas like stop charges or e-commerce stop rates, and just said we didn't even want to worry about that moving number that moves up and down, and just wanted to get into different categories. So you are correct that it will not cover the entire price of fuel. I will say too, on the line haul side, it is similar in that there's a fuel rate paid per mile. It also is not built to completely cover the price of fuel, but sometimes it does. And it's very rare, but I do sometimes see it where when maybe you have a great fuel strategy and all new trucks. I have seen it where contractors are running really efficiently there and getting a significant or all of their fuel price covered. But it is not built to do that. It's more of just contractors who have such a good fleet that they're beating the model.
Excellent. Yeah, Tyler, I would also add to that if you get in touch with us, we have the Route Consultant Purchasing Alliance here in-house, and we have a really great fuel card where you have fantastic benefits that you don't really achieve at the pump, but rather you get a quarterly reimbursement check for those. That can be a huge boom to a business that's starting up. So if you're interested in that, we'd love to talk to you a little bit more. We'd be happy to help you there. Great questions, guys. Keep them rolling in. We have one from Michael Tucci, who asked, do you have any past webinars or links that explain negotiations while obtaining a listed contract? For example, how do I obtain stem miles, cost, etc., and present that to FedEx? Josh?
Yeah, so we might have past webinars. I'm not 100% sure, but
yes,
it is.
They're all on YouTube.
Yeah. If they're there, they're on YouTube. The challenge with taking over a new territory and getting those costs to present to FedEx are that, one, if you're getting it directly from FedEx or something like Biz Buy Sell, it's basically going to be impossible. They're not going to have much of that information saved, and no one will really know it. If you're buying from a seller, that seller should have the information. They may have even done unique characteristics in the past and can help you through that process. So that can be a step you can take if the seller's working with you, knows their territory, and can help talk you through it. But other than that, if the seller's not there to help, there's not really this, a central source of data that you can get things from. So unless you've got direct access to someone who was previously running the territory, there's not a good way to really get a sense of some of those additional costs. So, I mean, you can get a sense of some of the things about your territory by looking at a map, by looking at the terminal, maybe doing a drive, just kind of driving through some of those routes and seeing what they look like. But it's going to be different than the knowledge that comes from someone who's been running it, been experiencing the challenges of those routes that are truly unique to those routes. And if it was really evident, hopefully FedEx would have considered it. So what you're looking for are the things that are harder to find. And that usually just has to come from knowledge and experience, which typically are things the seller will have. I will say that if you're looking for the right questions to ask, the right things to ask the seller, the unique characteristics template has a ton of examples built in, the one that we have and can share with you. And it can help you think through, okay, I don't know if this is something affecting your territory, but are these three things something you've seen? And that can at least help you guide that conversation.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what I would say as well. It will be difficult to do without having the seller in your corner getting you that information, but there's ways we can help you at least get a head start on some of those things. From Hannah Mumford, she asks, who do we contact for guidance on negotiation? We are up for renegotiation. Also, we would like the template for the unique characteristics as well. Hannah, yeah, we'd be happy to help you with that. Reach out to info@routeconsultant.com and we will send you, depending on where you're located at, to the correct broker on our team who can get all this stuff for you and help start those contract negotiation talks. And we'll give you whatever advice we possibly can. And we'd be happy to help you with that, okay? info@routeconsultant.com. It should be in the chat box for you.
Yeah.
Next, again, from Tim Fincham. Glad you're here, man. After the interview is complete, referring to the AIM, the assignee interview meeting, he asks, does the seller need to do anything else to complete the transaction with FedEx? Terminal is indicating that a step is being missed by the seller in order to issue the contract. Tim, yes, there is a ton to do before and after the AIM. I can tell you that with absolute certainty. Both buyer and seller will have things they need to do. Most of that's going to be a lot of back office work through MyGroundBiz. There's going to be, you know, like Josh mentioned earlier, the CSA reassignment, all that stuff that happens electronically through that back office platform. There are a number of things that can be delaying this from the seller side. So if you have specific questions about a deal maybe you're going through right now, reach out to us. Again, info@routeconsultant.com. Let us know where you're at, and we'll get you connected with someone who can help and maybe point you in the right direction. And we'd be happy to go through all that with you. Josh, anything to add there?
Yeah, Tim, I know you're working with Anna, so I can sync with Anna offline. We can help make sure all of those questions get answered.
Perfect. Anonymous attendee, any estimates or guesses on percentage breakdowns between the options selected with Misos 1 through 3? Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you any kind of real percentage breakdown. I can tell you that we do often advise people to take Miso 3 and have in the past, but also I can tell you the last year was, last year was kind of a down year. And so a lot of people did kind of err into the Miso 1 or Miso 2 category to go for consistency. And so that's completely fine. It's a little of it is going to vary with how people feel each year and what they want to maximize. Like I talked about, consistency versus potential profitability. And so some people also care more about cash flow than they do about equity. And so for them, it's most important to make sure they're getting the right amount of cash flow each week, as opposed to making sure they're maximizing their potential. So it's really going to depend. I wouldn't be able to tell you a perfect breakdown. If I had to guess, I bet a decent number of people actually pick Miso 2 just because it's a option in the middle. So they're, kind of taking it as the balanced option. Most of our career, we chose Miso 3 though.
Yeah, I've been going through these Misos with clients for years now, and we don't want to take the FedEx angle here and say one size is going to fit all. Everyone's CSA is going to be unique, and we'll be happy to go through your Misos with you and help you make the most educated decision. But I have found that 9 times out of 10, Miso 3 is where I would put the contract if it were my dollars in my CSA. It puts you just in a little bit more control to where maximizing efficiency in your business will really maximize the profitability there. And there was someone who popped in. I'm just going to jump ahead real quick. Nope, we already got to that one. Good. Anonymous again asks, do you have finance options available to buy P&D routes? Anonymous, we've got a ton of really great options. We've done webinars in the past about creative ways to get funding for these deals. We have burgeoning partnerships that we're building with SBA lenders. There's always the option to go the private capital route, seller financing, debt assumption, cash. We can be super creative for P&D or line haul. Josh, I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum in the past. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I would just tell you, yes, we have a lot of options. And in general, if you hear the narrative that you can't finance one of these, that is incorrect. Probably over 70% of our deals still are done with some kind of financing. It's pretty rare that we have a full cash business. We love when we get those, but we still do find financing ways to make almost all of these deals work. So I would certainly not buy into the idea that these are not financeable. And there's just a few different paths that will guide you down. We've got a bunch of different banks and lenders that we can work with to make sure we find the right option for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Perfect answer there, Josh. A really great add on there. Tyler Harris now asks, would like clarification on the e-commerce stop charge. Is that all home deliveries? Is it in addition to the stop charge? It's a great question, Josh. What do you have for him?
Yeah, it's how FedEx has designated the difference between residential and business deliveries. So there's a different rate for those two types of stops. And so you will see on a settlement statement a stop rate and a package rate for e-commerce versus what is just called a stop in a package, but is really, traditionally ground or business stops. And so they are broken down separately on the settlements. They have a separate rate. FedEx pays a little bit differently for e-commerce because the way they calculate e-commerce, they see it as being denser. Typically you're delivering to multiple places in a neighborhood. And so your expenses are lower to make those stops is how they see it. And so they pay it a little bit differently than business stops. So that is what that difference is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. Tyler Harris, he's the last one that we have lined up here. Folks, if you have more questions, please feel free to jump right in, type them out for us. We've got a few more minutes here. We'd be happy to stick around and answer whatever you have for us. Is the PCAT, non-financial options and elections page version number the Miso number? So Tyler, this can get super confusing when you talk about these pages. So real quick, the Misos, when they're presented to you, the Miso and the PCAT are essentially the same document, and you'll see 3 of them every time you get that. You have Miso 1, 2, and 3. In about the middle top portion of the first page, you'll see if it's Miso option 1, 2, or 3. It will tell you there. And as you go down to the last page, the PCAT will show you the final overall revenue projections for that specific Miso. That being said, if you look on that page, you'll see what is going to end up being your Schedule C, which will break down your per stop charge, your weekly service charge, all of those ancillary charges that we talked about. Just take them, line them up from the smallest per stop charge to the largest, and that's your 1 is the smallest, 2 is the middle, 3 is the largest per stop charge. If you can't find 1, 2, or 3 listed on that PCAT, that's the easiest way to kind of differentiate which one is which there. But it's a really good number. Anything you want to add there, Josh?
Yep, yeah, that's right. You'll just get multiple PCATs. You can just think about PCATs as the kind of the breakdown that comes with each Miso, showing your stops, your volume, and what leads to that revenue number. And so you'll get multiple of those every year, 1 with each Miso.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. So Tyler, there's your answer. Anonymous, what type of entity can be an owner? Sole prop, SCorp, LLC, CCorp, publicly traded entity. Anonymous, it's a great question. 2 answers, SCorp or CCorp. Really, you want to be an SCorp. The CCorp, if you're going to use specific funding strategies during the acquisition process, but overall, you're going to want to be an SCorp. Unless there's some really specific nuances to state tax law or the way that you have things structured. Maybe it's through a trust. There's a lot of different things that can go there. Always consult your CPA and your tax accountants and attorneys and things like that for answers on that one. But SCorp is always going to be your best bet. CCorp, if you're going through things like a Rob's 401k type of a program for funding that. Let's see here. Amy Fitch, so good to hear from you again.
On that last one, Dan.
Go ahead, Josh.
It's just to make sure you're hearing us. SCorp and CCorp, that's not advice. FedEx actually won't allow you to do anything else. So those are your only 2 choices. You can't be an LLC, you can't be anything else. So Danny's right, probably 80% or more of contractors are SCorps. There's reasons why you would do C, but Danny's right on that.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Amy Fitch, great to hear from you. Is there a way to go backwards and find my 3 Misos from my last negotiation and my ground biz? There absolutely is. Josh, do you want to maybe just direct her towards info@Route Consultant? I'm working with her right now. I can get her over to you. Yeah,
I'll just say it just in case anybody else is listening. So you'll go to my ground biz account, you'll log in, type in your username and password, search bar at the top. If you type in proposal entry, it will pop up. You click on that, and then you can click view. I think it's view previous entries or view something like that. And it'll pull up a list of all of the previous ones, and you'll be able to see each of the options. They'll be labeled Miso 1, 2, and 3. So look for the last time you negotiated, and it'll populate all of the options you ever got, but that's where you find it. Proposal entry, and then view, click the radio dial to view options, and all of those will populate.
Perfection. There we go. There's our MGBA expert for you. Tim Yarborough, great to hear from you too, Tim. He says software recommendations that, quote, jive best with FedEx. I've used Wave and Quicken with other businesses. What are your recommendations? It's a great question. Josh, what do you have?
That is a long answer. What I can tell you is that there are a bunch of different categories that these vendors will fall into, a bunch of different things we would recommend. Both, there are some technologies you have to have, there are some that are strongly recommended by us, and we have lists of vendors that we would recommend basically across the spectrum. So whatever it is, if there's a specific category you have a question on, we can make a recommendation. Or if you're working with us through the process to buy a business or working with us as a part of our consulting program, we have that full vendor list broken out, and we'll guide you through recommendations to make sure that you're on the right path there.
100%. Couldn't have said it better myself. Literally, you took it right out of my head, Josh. Tim Freeze, can you clarify Miso 1, 2, and 3 again? I thought 3 was fixed option, but someone suggested it might be variable. Thank you. Yes, that's absolutely right, Tim. So think of 1 as the smallest number, that's your smallest variable option. 3 is the biggest number, it's the biggest variable option. 2 is in the middle. That's the way that I would give it to you. But Miso number 3 is always going to be your highest variable, lowest fixed amount rate. So the weekly service charge will be smaller, the variable charges will be larger on Miso 3 every single time. Okay. That is all of the questions that we have in the box right now. Going once, going twice. You guys have anything else, please let us know. We've had a blast with you here today. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, info@routeconsultant.com. We will direct you to the right person and make sure that everything is good to go. Make sure you copy those links that are in the chat box before you get out of here. Register for that Line Haul New Investors Summit and our Dallas Peak Prep Roadshow. It is going to be awesome, and we hope to see you guys there. Have a great week. We'll talk to you guys later.